it's Sam. In astrology, everything can be reduced to 3 important categories and about 20 different means of evaluation. If you can get your head around these things, you can use your mind like a special Swiss Army knife to focus in and use exactly the right technique and the right tool at the right time. In this video, I'm going to explain these important things to you. Have you ever wondered why you start reading charts or you gather a lot of information about astrology, but you can't seem to make sense of it consistently? Even though you understand planets, signs, houses, there's always some other special rule that an astrologer brings up. They say something like, oh, well, that's because they were planets exchanging, or the planet was this, or doing that, or there was this special thing. There's always one more little special thing that you're missing. In the middle of 2018, I taught a course on this called the Swiss Army Knife course. And in this course, I dissected all of these little techniques and methods that you must know if you're going to penetrate to the next level of astrological chart reading. Without knowing these things, there's always going to be some gap, some little nuance that you're not quite getting. Now, this comes from my close to 20 years of reading charts professionally. This is the best of the best, the cream of the cream, skimmed off the top and just focused for you so that you can learn to read charts consistently without getting lost and getting stuck. It takes all of the methods and the principles that you've learned and organizes them, recalibrating them, going deeper into them, but then focusing on special relationships that the planet signs, houses, nakshatras, and all have with each other. Because it also feeds into one of the biggest problems that you also have, which is the overwhelm and the constant snacking on YouTube videos and the sort of overwhelm that you're probably used to in your astrology studies. Well, in this video, I'm going to address all of these things and more. And I'm also going to give you an opportunity to get the course where I taught the solution to these problems at a huge discount. The course was held over 3 days. We got together and examined all of these different components of the Swiss Army Knife course, then looked at chart after chart after chart and examined these things in great depth. The only way to really learn these kinds of methods and subtleties is to bring together people and then show these principles in chart after chart, which is just what we did. The course will really help you overcome this feeling of overwhelm, this internet snacking habit, this illusion that you actually understand a lot more than you do, and this way that you can take what you do understand and go much more deeply into it so that your chart readings are consistent and you understand with a lot more depth how to approach reading charts in a consistent way so that the people that you know in your life and you as well get a lot more out of your life. You may also be looking at your own chart way too much, getting lost and confused in that. You know, you're not so different than I was when I started out. I was looking at my chart a lot. I would listen to other teachers, and even though they had good information to share, they were sort of lacking a system. They didn't really know how all of these things went together. And in this video, again, I'm going to break all this down for you and introduce you to this opportunity. It's hard to go through life loving something like astrology, but then when you look around, everybody thinks you're kind of weird because you don't really know how it works and you don't know how to use it in your life. So you say things that aren't really very connected. Again, I totally understand how this works because I was exactly where you are when I started, read the astrology books. There was no method and no system. So what I've done in my work and in my career is take this astrological knowledge and organize it into certification programs and other things. And this Swiss Army Knife course was taking even the next level of that and integrating and organizing all of the subtleties. These subtle connections are what's missing in your astrological depth. So let's get to the solutions and what you can do about them right now. So first, we have 3 categories that are important when you try to learn and study astrology. The first is you have to evaluate the static and the dynamic factors. Now, static factors have to do, for example, with the chart itself, that's established at birth time, and the dynamic factors have to do with things like dashas and transits. Some things are set, and other things are changing, and you have to evaluate these two things. In the Swiss Army knife course, I started with evaluating the static and the dynamic factors first, and there's a hierarchy of importance for different character traits so that you understand these static factors. What's the inherent capacity of the person? Knowing this allows you to really drill down into that sort of structure. One of the main tools that you use, or one of the main sort of blades in the Swiss Army knife, is evaluating the ruling planet's dignity and how powerful the ruling planet is. In fact, the power and importance and integrity of any house ruler becomes extremely important as a static factor. It shows an inherent capacity and nature in that area of life, like the 10th house ruler for the career, Venus and the 7th house ruler, and the capacity for relationships. Then there are things called character yogas. There are different character yogas that show, again, an inherent capacity called Mahapurusha yogas. There are other yogas that show a certain character. This is a static factor. And we have this hierarchy of importance between different life potentials, meaning maybe a person has a really powerful 10th house ruler and a career drive, and their relationship is kind of weak. So the importance in their life is much less for the relationships, more for the career. Again, this is a static factor. This is built into the nature of the person. So if you're trying to evaluate, why isn't your career going crazy at this time? Because now they're in a certain dasha, which is a dynamic factor, and you say, I just can't understand why your relationships aren't important, even though you're running the dasha of Venus. Well, it's because when you look at the hierarchy of importance in their chart, relationships aren't that important. Again, these are the kinds of things you need to be able to evaluate. Then there's a thing called the 3 karakas, means the 3 indicators. There's the natural indicator like Venus, then the 7th house ruler, and then planets in the 7th house. That's for relationships. Those are the 3 karakas. Also harmonic charts. Again, these are all kind of static factors that you need to be able to drill down into. Once you've gathered all this information, these are some of the static and dynamic factors. Of course, this implies things like the dignities. Exalted is a dignity, so it's debilitated, but there's a whole range of dignities. Then there's also special planets for each ascendant. For example, for Scorpio, Jupiter is the indicator of children, but it's also the 5th house ruler, which has to do with children. Okay? For Aries, Venus is not only the 7th house ruler, but it's the karaka of relationships, so it becomes extremely important. So again, these are all built into the static factors. But then we get into more dynamic factors like the dashas and the transits and the concept of the karmas ripening. Because even though we have a static relationship with the chart, which means it's the person's inherent nature, at any given time you're working on specific parts of that nature, and that's the dynamic factor. What dasha is the person in? Which transits are happening at any given time? What's actually making the thing happen? Is it the dasha or is it the transit? These are very different, because the dasha shows perhaps a 20-year cycle and a transit shows maybe a month cycle. So again, all of these are very different. So the first big category of being able to go deeper is evaluating static and dynamic factors and knowing which ones you're looking at. Once you get this handled, you will not be so confused about why certain things don't appear the way they should. Like I used the example of someone running the dasha cycle of Venus, and yet relationships aren't important at all, for example. So once we get the static and the dynamic factors handled, then we need to be able to integrate the relationship more between planet signs, houses, nakshatras, and harmonic charts. We need to then see how these energies interact with each other. For example, there's a very specific energetic karmic development that happens between the Rashi chart or the natal chart and the harmonic charts and the nakshatras, and when the karmas ripen, different parts of our nature become activated. When we can see the difference between this chart or this transit or this dasha, then what appears to us to be an inner conflict or something that isn't in sync becomes something that's easy to explain. For example, there are no real confusing things in astrology. People get overwhelmed because they're putting things in gross categories of good and bad. And you see a good thing and a bad thing, so which one is it, good or bad? It's always the same question, some version of is it good or bad. So for example, I used the situation of, let's say someone is in Venus Dasha, and relationships become important in Venus, but they're not actually following their relationships so much. Well, why isn't it? Well, Venus isn't so good, but this other thing is good, so how do I explain it? Well, again, this is what we go over in the course, because you also could have a situation where the relationships are mixed. What happens if Venus isn't so good in the chart, but the 7th house ruler is really strong? Which one is it, good or bad? You have this great, let's say you have a difficult planet in the 7th house, but the 7th house ruler is great. Which one is it, good or bad? Again, this is where we get stuck. So again, being able to resolve these conflicts and how to explain these things easily is a big part of what I do in this Swiss Army knife course. Knowing exactly which tool to take out really helps. One of the ways we do it is we drill down into the harmonic charts as well to make specific, accurate predictions. Very important to know how to read the harmonic charts within the structure of the Rashi chart. Another great tool at our disposal in the Swiss Army knife is using Parashara and Jaimini techniques at the same time, knowing how to see both points of view. Now, those of you who haven't studied Jaimini astrology, that's fine, because I show you how these things work. They're very direct, they're very easy to use, especially if you can streamline the method. So again, Parashara and Jaimini techniques are also being deployed in the Swiss Army knife approach. Another important thing is how to see the difference between results that someone gets and the level of consciousness and enjoyment or detriment behind it. There are 4 choices. We can get the thing that we want and like it, we can get the thing we want and not like it, or we cannot get the thing and not like it, or we cannot get the thing and be okay with it. So how do you see what's going on here is very important in being able to assess and evaluate your clients and what they're going through. Because sometimes they say, I really want this thing, and you know that they're just gravitating towards something that's not going to be good for them. But how do you see that in the chart? How do you see when they're talking about this thing that they're not going to get? How can you reassure them that, look, it doesn't look like this thing is going to happen, but you're going to be okay with it, and here's why. Again, if you just say that, it's going to be empty. It's going to be meaningless. In fact, it'll be worse. You'll hurt your reputation because it'll sound like you're just blowing New Age sunshine where the sun don't shine. And that's never good. So you have to be able to explain these things truthfully, with credibility, and unravel those subtle parts of their consciousness that are accurate, and basically read their mind and read their motivations so that you can reassure them accurately and correctly that this thing that they think they might want right now, they're not even going to be thinking twice about it because of what you've learned in this course. So in the Swiss Army knife class, we took all of those static and dynamic factors and then linked them up with each other through planet signs, houses, nakshatras, harmonic charts, so you can see how the static and the dynamic factors talk to each other in real time. Then I went deeper into some of the most important subtle chart evaluation factors, which have to do with things such as Mahapurusha Raja Yogas. These are great person yogas. When you see them, really pay attention to them. When you see that, then you'll know the inherent capacity of the person to rise above difficulty and to have a kind of superpower. You want to be able to know the client's superpowers because they're going to be pulling on them a lot. Also, exchanges, when planets exchange with each other. It's a very, very important thing to see and to notice in a chart. So you look for exchanges. And again, I don't just tell you this, I show you how they work. I show you this dialogue between the planets in the exchange and the different kinds of exchange. Sometimes friendly planets exchange, sometimes unfriendly planets exchange, but I show you the power in the exchange. You need to be able to understand that. There's also this thing called Bhavat Bhavam compounding, which I'll get into you'll see once you get the course, but it's all about this derived houses and how you can see, for example, the third house is the 8th from the 8th. Very important, right? The 9th house is the 5th from the 5th. Very important. So these higher octave harmonics of different houses is a secret hidden key that I unlock and show you. There's also very important lessons on hemming. When you see planets or houses get hemmed between others, you notice the real difficulty. Again, and it's not just a judgment. I don't just teach you how to identify it and, you know, stimulate your monkey mind. Oh yeah, hemming, I know what hemming is. No, you don't, probably. You don't know how to interpret it very well. I know, because most people don't. And that includes famous astrologers. I know, because I'll hear them see it and go, oh yeah, it's also hemming, so that's not good. And it's one of these good and bad things. Like I said earlier, well, what happens if you see hemming, which is not good? Let's say it's difficult hemming, but it's hemming something that's really powerful. Well, then which one is it, good or bad? Again, this is the whole problem. So these are the things that I unravel in the course. Maybe you have difficult hemming of a really powerful planet, and All of it needs to be discussed and talked about and understood. Exact degrees. Again, very important, secret sort of tool in your Swiss Army knife. One of the important blades, or the, you know, can openers or whatever. You've got to understand exact degrees, especially when they're important. And you'll see when they become important. They're not always important. In fact, none of these things are always important. This is another thing I talk about in the course. When they become important, when do you pay attention to these things? And how much, and how do you interpret them? And how do you see them within the matrix of powerful and effective chart analysis that's repeatable? Again, that's what people are lacking in this new age internet snacking approach to astrology. So it's probably very likely that you've gathered a lot of information, maybe too much, but you don't know how to organize it very well. This Swiss Army knife course did that, does that, and will do it for you as well. And again, just many inside tricks that you can only see after 15 years of reading a couple hundred charts a year of paid clients. There's nothing to substitute for that kind of experience and that kind of work. The course was taught through live video, but you get the recordings to watch over and over again for the rest of your life. And, you know, on the recordings, you see me not only teaching, but also interacting with the other students, answering their great questions. These were live Zoom video conferences, and again, you get access to these recordings and you have them for the rest of your life. Now, this is such a superior way of learning as opposed to maybe going to a conference and then listening to a class one time, then never hearing it again. In the Swiss Army Knife course, you get access to all of the videos, audio, and electronic PDF manuals. Just the amount of raw class time is more than 12 hours. Now, initially, I only charged $179 for these classes, which is already a steal, less than $15 an hour. But you can get them now for a special price. You know, we're all very spoiled in this information day and age where we can just digest information so casually. It's easy to not appreciate the value, but if I added up the value of the raw class time, the time it took me to process the videos, upload them to the exclusive website, create the electronic manuals, it would be at least 40 hours of work. And that says nothing of the decades of training that I actually had to put in to figure all this stuff out. Seriously, even at a modest price of $15 an hour, that comes out to about $600 for the class material that you will get for the rest of your life. But of course, you're not paying anywhere near $600. It's much less than that at this reduced price. Frankly, I'm thrilled to be able to leverage the technology in this way and be able to offer such a massive value so affordably. But you shouldn't lose sight of the value. But also you can keep in mind, I guarantee that you'll enjoy and learn from these recordings, or you can get your money back. As everybody knows who has done business with me, I offer money back guarantee on all classes, so it's really sort of a no-brainer. You can go ahead and register now, take advantage of this special discount, and be watching and learning this amazing system and all of these amazing different, you know, techniques within the next few minutes. So go ahead and check it out, and I'm sure you'll really enjoy this Swiss Army Knife Vedic Astrology course.